Hello everyone, good morning. We are an hour away from the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, presenting her 8th successive budget. Now, this is the first full budget of the Modi government's 3rd term. She has already met the president. That's the Bahi Khata in a tablet, as it were. And that's the photo opportunity that happens first thing in the morning for the finance minister and her team that has prepared this budget. As I said, she's already met the president. The president has offered her curd and sugar. It is a tradition that is a staple of exam days across India. And there you have the pictures there. In fact, in many ways, Nirmala Sitharaman is on test today, especially as far as India's salaried middle class is concerned. The hopes and prayers of the 3 crore Indians who actually pay income tax rests not with goddess Lakshmi, who the Prime Minister invoked yesterday, but with the lady on your screens, Nirmala Tai. In fact, the President yesterday as well said, when the middle class dreams big, the nation soars. Is this a hint? Well, the middle class is expecting more than just a polite thank you for your taxes this time. The prevailing sentiment, ladies and gentlemen, in India always has been that the so-called middle class, or to be precise, the salaried class, is used as the cash cow to fund welfare schemes for the poor and political freebies, while the super rich continue to get away without paying their share in nation building. Well, with just an hour to go for the presentation of the first full-time budget, here's our wish list of what should be part of the citizens' budget. First, long-standing demand. It's the issue of standard deductions. Currently, the standard deduction is 50,000 rupees in the old tax regime and 75,000 in the new tax regime. What is the wish? Not too much. All we are expecting is that this should increase to 1 lakh rupees across both regimes. It is not asking for too much. Secondly, and this is something we may just see, currently, the income tax rebate limit stands at 5 lakhs under the old tax regime and 7 lakhs under the new tax regime. That means that those who earn less than that are effectively paying zero tax. The wish is to increase the rebate limit to 10 lakh rupees for both regimes. Will that happen? Well, the middle class is keeping its fingers crossed. Of course, there's a big question mark on who actually constitutes the middle class in this country. There is no fixed definition. That is up for debate as well. We'll try and sort that out as we progress through the day today. Third, what the middle class needs is a much needed revision in the tax slabs, even at the upper end of the spectrum. For income above 15 lakh rupees, a 30% tax is levied. It simply doesn't make sense that a person earning 15 lakh rupees a year is taxed at the same rate as someone who is earning, say, 50 lakh rupees a year. What is long overdue is a reduction in this rate to 25% and an increase in the slab to an upper limit of 20 lakh rupees. Fourth, ladies and gentlemen, it's mind-boggling that Section 80C exemption in the old tax regime has remained unchanged at 1.5 lakh rupees for the last 10 years. Since 2014, it has been at 1.5 lakhs. It's not in keeping with the reality of our times. The wish here is to hike it to at least 2.5 lakhs. Fifth, under the old tax regime, HRA exemption is 50% in major metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata. And it is 40% elsewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, what do I say? This is an archaic understanding of what metros are in this country because it does not include modern hubs like Bangalore or Hyderabad or NCR towns like Gurugram and Noida, where the rent is sky high. So this needs to change as well. Sixth, the National Pension Scheme. The contributions offer an exemption up to 50,000 rupees in the old tax regime, but there's nothing in the new tax regime. The wish is to raise exemptions to 1 lakh rupees across both regimes. And finally, GST currently stands at a whopping 18% on medical insurance premiums. This makes absolutely no sense, and even Nirmala Sitharaman's own ministerial colleague, Nitin Gadkari, has written to her and asked her to revoke it. At the very least, it should be reduced to 5% for regular citizens and made 0 for senior citizens. Question is, will the 2025 union budget bring the much-needed tax relief for the middle class and the common citizen? We'll know in the next couple of hours. But one thing is clear, the demand for a fairer, more equitable system, tax system, is louder than ever. Can the BJP afford to take India's salaried taxpayer for granted after its 2024 drubbing, where it didn't even get a majority to form its own government? Let's hope this year the government listens and the promise of prosperity extends to every Indian taxpayer, not just the poor or the rich or the farmer. A host of guests are joining us this evening, and let's quickly put back the pictures of Nirmala Sitharaman meeting the president. In fact, now I believe she's just about reaching the parliament as well. For the moment, how the markets open now, do remember that on weekends the markets don't work. But today, they seem to be optimistic ahead of the budget. The BSE Sensex is up by more than 1,000 points. So that is good news. There is some degree of optimism in the markets. Hope that optimism extends to India's salaried middle class as well once we have the full blueprint of the budget. Because even to understand the budget, you need at least a couple of hours. That too, if you're an expert. We'll be joined by our guest this evening. Gurcharan Das is a senior economist. He's an author. Anuj Bali is founder, ANBAC advisor. Jayant Krishna is a former regional director of TCS. Thank you very much. Sonica Aron is founder of Marchingsheep. We'll also be going across to KV Subramania, who's a former chief economic advisor to the government of India, who's joining us in just a bit. KV, before I come to you, I need to go to Mr. Gurcharan Das. Mr. Gurcharan Das, a quick question. There is much commentary. If you open all websites that are tracking the budget this morning, there's much commentary on the sari that Nirmala Sitharaman is wearing. It is a white silk sari. It has a gold border, a magenta gold border. It's not very clear in the pictures we are showing you here, but it's essentially a hand-painted Madhubani sari. And the interpretation is that this is a subtle hint. This is not a fashion choice. This is a subtle hint that Bihar is in to, get some special goodies from the finance minister this year. Is that how you're reading it? Because last time's budget had left us all feeling very blue. And the color of the sari that Nirmala Sitharaman was wearing in 2024 was blue, if you remember.
Well, as long as it's not red, which is going to take us into the left wing of the ideological spectrum, I think anything goes.
But do you think there are subtle hints on what the budget could involve, given what Prime Minister Modi said yesterday? He invoked Ma Lakshmi, right? And then the President of India said, look, if India's middle class thinks big, if it has big dreams, then the nation prospers. And then today you have Nirmala Sitharaman wearing a Madhubani sari. Are these all subtle hints? Are these fashion choices, or are things said just to say them?
Well, I think if it's going to make us happier, let's take it as a positive hint in the right direction.
Okay. So before I come to you with more questions, let me just get in KV here. KV, thank you very much. Good morning. You've been a former chief economic advisor to the government of India. Can I ask you if you're missing the halchal of budget day, as it were?
The honest answer is no, actually. I really enjoyed my stint there and I had my fill. I think, as they say, everything changes, and wisdom is being able to accept and live with that change in a very happy manner.
Realistically, can I ask you what the urban salaried middle class Indian can expect from today's budget? Look, our wish list is very long. No one wants to pay taxes, at least not the 30% taxes that we usually pay. We can wish for the moon. We are not going to get the moon, I understand that. But realistically, what can we expect?
We'll have to wait and see. There are, there have been budgets that I've been part of, which have been, quite path-breaking. The COVID budget, for its post-COVID budget, was a very good one, with a lot of reforms being brought in. There were tax rate changes that were done in a previous budget. So I think it really remains to be seen. I am myself hopeful as well, that the urban, middle class, especially the salaried individuals, would get some relief. I think it is important also to emphasize that small firms and budding entrepreneurs are supported by reducing the difficulty in doing business, especially from the taxation side, because the complexity of tax law, whether it is on the GST or on the income tax side, that does actually pose a lot of difficulties for doing business for small firms. And this is an aspect that must be focused on. To give relief to the salaried middle class, I think it is also critical. This is an area that we had emphasized when I was part of the government, to expand the tax net, especially to self-employed professionals. There is evidence, across countries which shows that, professionals that run their own firms like lawyers, chartered accountants, dentists and others, actually, they don't pay adequate taxes. And I think, making sure that they actually also contribute their share is important to be able to provide adequate relief to the middle class, salaried middle class.
Okay, but if you are to increase the tax base, and I understand the number of people who pay taxes in this country has to go up dramatically for the tax structure to be equitable, by that logic, rich farmers need to be taxed as well. It's a politically sensitive subject, so, governments don't look into it, but there are farmers, enough and more farmers who earn more than 50 lakh rupees a year. I wonder why they are not being taxed or brought into the tax bracket.
See, in an ideal world, one would have, made sure that rich farmers, those that earn more than a certain threshold, like somebody earns more than 50 lakhs. And I think, if we are sort of, if we're not too emotional and we don't go by the rhetoric, then a farmer is equally a producer, much like any other producer. And a time in the in the 1960s, etc., thinking about the farmer as somebody who was a very, putting them on a pedestal was good, because India was a food scarce economy at that time. But today that is not the reality. And therefore, thinking about the farmer as also another producer is, I think, the right way to go from an idea. That's what ideally I would want as an economist. That will also help in, in plugging some of the loopholes, because there are many people who actually declare their other income as agricultural income, and thereby reduce their tax payment as well. So I think it is good from both perspectives, but I think that would be a wish. If it were to come true, I would be really happy.
Mr. Gurcharan Das, can I bring you in? If you look at the numbers that the government of India itself has put out, you have exactly 3 crore people in this country who have actually paid tax. Is some relief due for this set of people?
Well, I think that's asking the wrong question. The right question to ask is that you talked about the middle class, you talked about the urban middle class. The reality is that we need to still expand that urban middle class. That's the true failure. If you ask me, since 1991, India has been growing handsomely at 6.5% over 30 years. Now, that's impressive for a democracy. But the fact is that we have not created the jobs commensurate with that growth. And the reason for that is that we have not had an industrial revolution. Manufacturing still represents 15% of GDP and employs less than 11% of the people, and exports only 2% of global manufactured exports. So this, we seem to have skipped. We seem to have gone from a green revolution to an IT, to a digital revolution, and the factory stage, which creates jobs for people who are leaving the farms. And the 45% of our population is still on the farm. And and half of them could be removed and productivity would go up even in agriculture. So my approach would be for the long term. Now, I don't think the budget is going to particularly fix that, but the budget can show the direction. For example, in the last budget, you had, and we want to know today from the finance minister, what has happened with the labor incentive scheme that they announced in the last budget, which, scheme that would reward labor in incentives. And frankly, today, we are in a far better position to create that industrial revolution than we were in 1991. I mean, today, the infrastructure has improved. Road mileage is double of what it was 10 years ago. The India is one country, thanks to GST. Port handling capacity has quadrupled. And also, Apple has shown the way. That's one way. There are two ways you can create jobs quickly. One is to bring the big labor-intensive manufacturers, big brands, the way iPhone 16 now is being manufactured in India, and just 15% of the global production is in India. But that 15% has created 6 lakh jobs. That means, which is 150,000 direct jobs, 70% of whom are women, and four times that in terms of indirect jobs. So all I'm saying is that, okay, that's one way. The second way is startups. Startups create jobs. Big companies and mom and pop stores don't create jobs. So startups can create jobs. Therefore, if I were in the shoes of the government, I would do what Tamil Nadu is doing. Tamil Nadu is getting all the investment. The big investment of Foxconn for the Apple manufacturer, the phone manufacturer, has come to Tamil Nadu. And the Tamil Nadu chief minister went to America and he convinced the Ford Motor Company to reopen their factory for export, and he succeeded. Similarly, the Prime Minister of Vietnam, when he heard that Vietnam had lost the iPhone, this is the China plus one strategy, which is another important moment in our history, that manufacturers are looking for another manufacturing base aside from China. And so the jobs that we have got have come from China. So therefore, what the Vietnam Prime Minister did when he went to Cupertino, California, and said, look, okay, we understand we have lost the iPhone to India. Give us the tablet. And he succeeded. So this is how, in all the labor-intensive sectors, I would have maybe not the Prime Minister, but the chief ministers of state have the responsibility to go and woo these big manufacturers and sell the idea of India as an attractive manufacturing base. If we don't do that,
I have a counter question to that.
Your middle class, you've been talking about.
I have a counter question to that.
Sure.
Can I just quickly ask you a counter question? And before I ask that, just to tell our viewers that the Prime Minister has reached Parliament as well, ahead of the budget being presented. It's 10:20, so which means in another about 40 minutes we should have the Finance Minister on the floor of the House. So my counter question is this: you are saying India seems to, one of the big problems is that our middle class is not growing, and our middle class is not growing because there are no jobs. My point is, and this is not a point I am making actually, this is a point that the Chief Economic Advisor has made yesterday as well. Has Inc. let down India? Because in 2019, what happens? Corporate tax, which is at 30%, comes down to 22%. What was the hope? The hope was there would be more investments from the corporate sector. And with investment would be expansion. With expansion, jobs would be created. Wo hua nahi, we know that. Even corporates who employ people right now. India Inc.'s profits are up by 15%, but salaries are stagnant. So has India Inc. then failed India?
No, I think India Inc. has followed the incentive system that you've given it. The reality is the Indian market is still a protected market. And they have got used to the idea of not having international competition to play against. Therefore, they have not honed their skills and to go abroad. And how many Indian brands have gone abroad to make, which happened with Taiwan and Korea and China after that? Almost zero. And what we need to do is open the market, become export oriented, and frankly, that's the school. Open markets is the best school to learn to become competitive. And it's still not too late because the investment is coming from China. It will come, and India is today, they prefer Vietnam, Indonesia, our competitors. We need to become competitive. We need to do more reforms, reforms in labor, land, and those are familiar, sort of electricity rates. We need to become competitive. And we need today, the reality is that in an abundant labor country, cost of capital is cheaper than labor. So it needs and you talked about the middle class. Middle class in China is around 70%. India is still around 35%. So we need to grow that middle class. And this budget, last time there were some good schemes. Labor, the internship scheme, the apprentice scheme, these are very good. And they should be continued. And more, we must apply our mind if how the government can incentivize. They should open the market and incentivize India Inc. to go out, just as we want the big brands to come in, same way.
To come in. Okay, Mr. Gurcharan Das, thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you and speak to you once the budget has been announced. I know it will take some time for us to decipher the fine print. It will be easier for you than for us. I don't think we'll fully understand the budget till 4 days after it has been announced. But thank you very much for your time. I hope we can speak once the budget has been announced. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. Coming to all my other guests, post that, do stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just about 32 minutes away from Nirmala Sitharaman presenting her 8th successive budget to Parliament. Meanwhile, news coming in is this. The Prime Minister did arrive at the Parliament as is tradition. The Cabinet has met and now approved Budget 2025, which means it's all in the clear, which means the Finance Minister can happily walk in and make India's middle class hopefully happy by the time she finishes speaking. Now, the point is, how long will she speak? She does hold a record for the longest speech ever made by a finance minister while presenting her budget. That was about 2 hours, 42 minutes. It happened in 2020. Will she exceed that? We do not know. We'll just see. Well, I can tell you India's salaried middle class is expecting a lot from her. Will that happen? Let me go across to Sonica, Aron, Jayant, Krishna and Anuj Bali who are joining us on the broadcast. Sonica, Aron, can I come to you and ask you, as a private individual, we'll look at the macro picture later, but as a private individual, what is it that you're hoping that Nirmala Sitharaman today says on the floor of the House?
So, honestly, as an HR and D&I consultant, I am going to speak or rather represent the voice of a lot of women who work. MSMEs, small businesses, and the salaried class as well, because those are the people I work with. So let me start with women, right? We represent about 48% of the population, but even today, the representation across all sectors remains dismal. The wage gap is very real. For every 100 rupees a man earns, a woman is earning 40 rupees, and this is across sectors. So what we expect really is, there was an Equal Remuneration Act which came out in mid-70s. But where are we on the implementation? Are we
Correct.
really incentivizing organizations? You spoke about India Inc., but are we really creating awareness that what does it mean for an organization to have participation of nearly 50% of the country's population? And that requires further investment and funding for what will enable them. When I ask my clients that what does it, take to hire women, and they say talent nahi hai. Talent kyun nahi hai? Because last mile infrastructure nahi hai. I heard Mr. Das say that, we have more industry, we have more roads. But where is this industry? This industry is in the outskirts of big cities or even, tier two cities. Do
Correct.
we have safe transport? Do we have infrastructure to reach these space places? Do families feel safe? And we all know there are enough and more cases that get publicized. So, for example, and very simple examples, if there is a night shift, do we have GPS enabled buses? Do we have night cabs that can help women go for night shifts? Today, there are factories which say that women cannot work after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. And does that force women not to have careers? Yes, please. You had a question.
Actually, I was just going to add to the point. In India's 10 most populous states, this is something that came out in the economic survey yesterday, that in India's 10 most populous states, there are some 139, what do you call them, rules or regulations that actually, and they are not backed by any scientific fact, that actually hamper women from working on factory floors that could give them a better income. And you make the point about talent nahi hai. Talent to hai, but talent has to be nurtured. How many industries and how many companies and how many corporates are actually nurturing that talent? You said she's not ready for leadership. She's not ready for leadership because you have not nurtured her.
And
you have said she took 2 maternity breaks.
So I see, so the Maternity Act in 2017, which said that 6 months maternity break and a creche. Now, are we putting all the burden of creating a creche on the organizations? Now, how long is the creche available to a woman? If the creche is shutting down at 5, is she expected to go back home at 5? Where will she leave the child if she has to work after 5 p.m.? Because work can extend after 5 p.m.
Sure.
Her male colleagues can work, but she can't work because the creche is shutting down. How many states are still waiting or companies still waiting for the state government to say creche mandatory hai? Right? So that is number one. Second, POSH came about in the year 2013. The implementation in letter and spirit is still sketchy. How many sessions should we have? How many sessions are mandated? It is still tokenism.
Sure.
How much is the penalty? If people are not following it, penalty is 50,000 rupees. I mean, why should somebody even bother? A large organization will say, मैं 50,000 रुपए दे दूंगा यार. I mean, it doesn't matter. मैंने नहीं किया session, so it's okay. लेकिन what happens is that 10 people will say, we will not send our daughters. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to interrupt you there and just go back to taxes, which is the main theme of the show, because I think that's one pet peeve as far as India's middle class is concerned. But one thing is clear, and I think you make that point very astutely, that, if this dream of Vikasit Bharat by 2047 is to be achieved, 2 things have to happen. First, you have to have much more investment in the economy, and that will come from the private sector. Secondly, what you need to do is you need to get much, much more women into the workforce. I don't think anyone can dispute that. But Anuj Bali and Jayant Krishnan, I'm coming to you. Jayant Krishnan, the economic survey again has flagged this off. The economic survey is saying that corporate India has to do much more. For example, salaries. Why is the middle class in this country harassed? The middle class in this country is harassed, and it really depends on how you. It really depends on how you define the middle class. As far as I'm concerned, anyone who is earning 10 lakhs and above is middle class. Now, this poor middle class is paying 30% of his taxes, right? Indirect taxes and 20% GST. यानी आधी salary हमारी जो है जा रही है taxes में, direct and indirect. For corporate India, for India Inc., profits are at a 15-year high, yet salaries are stagnant. Why is that happening? Because if the economy has to do well, the employee has to have money in the hand to spend. We simply don't seem to have the money in our hand to spend despite earning decent amounts of money. We simply don't have the confidence.
See, let's look at how corporates operate. Especially the listed companies. They have a quarter-to-quarter survival, as they quarter-to-quarter tak, as it is jokingly called. Kind of a thing. So if their margins go down, their market value of the share goes down, and they're very, very sensitive, and they want to maintain their margins. And it's not that all corporates are their profits are soaring. There are some corporates whose profits are soaring, and in some other cases, they are dwindling also. They have taken a small dip also. No, surely, I think, corporates need to pay more. That should always be the agenda. But let's also realize, the cost arbitrage that we have today in between Indian salaries and American salaries, or even between Indian and Chinese salaries, that is giving the country a lot of competitive edge, right? See, post-COVID, right? India had emerged as the hottest destination on the planet for those MNCs which were trying to relocate their supply chains away from China, right? Or at least additional investments to go to other countries. But, I think fundamentally, even the economic survey has talked about, right? It says that, if we have to become a developed country by the year 2047, we have to go, come what may, at 8% per annum for the next 25 years. Because our per capita income is, just about $2,700, right? And if you have to take the per capita income to the developed this category, it has to become 8 to 9 times of what it is today, which cannot happen unless we grow at 8%. So if I were the finance minister, I would do whatever it takes to reduce all the impediments to growth, to FDI, and so on and so forth. See, remember, I am always reminded by what Dr. Manmohan Singh in his most transformative budget in the year 1991 said. He quoted Victor Hugo, and he said, any bright idea whose time has come, nobody can stop that, right? So I think let this be the budget for which Nirmala Sitharaman should be remembered for the rest of her life, right? If India has to take that quantum leap, big ticket reforms, we have regulators in every sector, right? But how equitable they are, how fair they are. Most members are appointed by the government, right? How do you transform regulators? Perhaps some kind of an introduction to the direct tax code, which a bill which was introduced but withdrawn earlier, Legal system, I have been into roles, you just introduced me to TCS, but I've been in other roles also, where I have seen a lot of overseas investors, they feel that the contract enforcement regime in India, the legal regime, is not robust enough. We need to strengthen that. Our trade policies vis-a-vis the major nations have to be rejigged so that our trade becomes a larger part of a GDP. Than what is about 30-35% right now. Disinvestment velocity has to go up. So there are lots of things which need to happen. Ease of doing business. I think we've improved from 100 plus to 63. But if we are the 5th largest economy, why shouldn't our ease of doing business also not be among the top 5 nations in the world, right? Regulatory certainty, lot of FDI. Why FDI is not growing at a pace which India had hoped post-COVID? The reason to my mind is, a lot of overseas investors feel that there has to be a regulatory certainty in the country, in the sense that when they make the investment decision, certain laws, certain rules prevail, policies prevail, and mid-course, those policies change, So I think that's very important. Land reforms, nobody wants to touch that land acquisition bill, which is causing a lot of pain, a lot of grief to investors, Labor reforms, government did start well. But, there was codification done in 4 broad buckets they were put. But somehow, it didn't, yield that kind of a benefit which the industry expected. So these
Sure.
things to my mind are very, very important. Do whatever it takes to remove all roadblocks to growth, and show hunger, right from the prime minister, who's like the chief executive of the country, and every chief minister who's the CEO of the state. They have to do whatever it takes, show extreme
Sure.
hunger that no investment which could have come to their state or to the country is allowed to go somewhere else. Do we have that kind of a hunger? I think this is very important to my
Like
mind here.
Vietnam's prime minister.
Absolutely. Mr.
Like
Gurcharan Das
Vietnam's
supported him.
prime minister, flying all the way to the United States of America and saying,
Absolutely.
if you have sent Apple to India for manufacturing, at least give us the tablet. That shows
Absolutely.
intent, that shows commitment,
Absolutely.
and they got the deal. Can I very quickly then, actually one of the things that the economic survey is flagging is the fact that even small businesses in India don't want to scale up because they simply don't want to deal with the sarkar and all the regulations and the legalities that come with it. And what happens in turn is that the employment they could have generated doesn't come about. It's something that the chief economic advisor is flagging off. Very quickly, before I take a break, Anuj Bali, we are just counting down to the finance minister presenting the budget. Can I ask you, as taxpayers, what it is that you would like to see?
Okay, so like we were just discussing about ease of doing business, I would like to first add there that see, today we are ranked 63rd in terms of ease of doing business. But when you start drilling down that report, what you understand is that there are three primary parameters why we are not still ranked very high on ease of doing business. So the first one being that starting a business in India is a huge challenge. So if you want to register a company, even something as simple as registering with ROC takes about 15 to 20 days, even 30 days at times, which really pisses off most of the investors. It really is a huge challenge, right? Who could we look at? We could look at Singapore, where you could incorporate a company within 2 hours of you filing the application. I think you should, if we are looking at Viksit Bharat in 2047, and I'm a great admirer of this government, and I feel that we are on the right path. But if you look at the best standards, I think we should try to learn this from Singapore, I feel. Then, the second thing, because of which we are still ranked 63rd, is that the ease of paying taxes is not that good here. If you look at a country like Estonia, they have really gone way ahead in digitizing the entire system and made it very easy for the taxpayers. So, that is another thing that we could probably pick up from, say, a country like Estonia. If you look at the third part, which, my fellow panelists also mentioned, which is about registering a property. So, we could adopt blockchain technology. I think Andhra Pradesh government has already started initiative in this regard. I feel that if you could solve these three problems, even Georgia as a country has adopted blockchain in land records. So, if you could solve these three primary problems, I think ease of doing business ranking will significantly go higher than what it is today. And that would really attract a lot of FDIs. Then coming to, I think there are other things like, the government should incentivize angel investors for investing into startups. One of the methodologies that were followed as a policy in India was that, why not give boost to sunrise sectors like we gave it to the IT sector in the 90s. Today, we wanted to give it to, say, EVs or, say, artificial intelligence. I would say that, we should, in fact, incentivize the angel investors. We could give them some sort of a deduction, like an ATC deduction, where, earlier you used to do a PPF investment and you used to get a 1.5 lakh deduction. You still get that. I'm just expecting they might just remove that now. So, those kind of things will really help get a lot of investments in that space also.
Okay.
So I think that's an important thing to look into. Then, for the Aam Aadmi, I feel that the exemption limit should go up. At least, the 10 lakhs should be the basic exemption limit. We should not be taxed if we are earning up to 10 lakhs. I think the middle class really needs that. They need a higher disposable income. The standard deduction, I feel, should be increased, which I'm really expecting they would increase now. And they should simplify the tax systems. I feel the tax filing processes need to be simplified. It's need of the hour. Otherwise, competitors like UAE or, say, Estonia, Singapore, and all of these countries are going to go faster than us.
And
that's my view.
Okay, and I do hope that the tax we are paying on health insurance premiums comes down as well. Why are we paying 18% for it? I don't understand. I'm going to thank all three of you for joining us. Thank you so much. I'm slipping into a quick break. There's still some time for the finance ministers to start speaking, about 15 minutes. We'll be going across live to that as well. For the moment, I'm taking a very quick break.